Hello, my name is Doug Lawrence, and I'm the Director of Education and co-founder for the International Mentoring Community. Welcome to the International Mentoring Community Library. Today we're going to talk about the mentor profile, in particular about the mentor through the Certificate of Competence mentor, and we're going to look at the action outcome statement, manage effective communication skills. I'd like to break this down a little bit for us and first off take a look at the definition of communication. So communication is the imparting or exchanging of information or news. It's a process by which information is exchanged between individuals through a common system of symbols, signs, or behavior. So how do we sustain communication channels? First, I think we need to understand what some of those may be. And the four most common types of communication channels are interpersonal, nonverbal, written, and oral communication. And the common theme amongst all of those is consistency. So when we talk about managers, the expectation is that managers will communicate in a consistent manner. And it's no different for a mentor. A mentor must ensure that their communication and the channels that they use is consistent session after session after session. Another thing for us to think about is the aspect of confidentiality and how important that is. I've actually had conversations with prospective mentees where they have asked the question about how confidential our conversations were going to be and how much I was going to report back to their manager about the nature of our conversation. And rest assured that I had to make sure that they were comfortable with the level of confidentiality that I was proposing. Reflection is also a huge tool that we can use as part of the communication process. That's where we pause, reflect, and share, and that's all part of that. And so the reflection can very much be what went well, what didn't go well, and what will we do differently next time. And if you can get yourself into that habit of doing that, session after session after session, you'll find that your growth as a mentor will continue on a session by session basis. And last but not least is the aspect of feedback. We need to be able to, as part of our communication process, we need to be able to provide feedback on how the communication is going, but also on goals, objectives, and other related topics that we're going to be dealing with. So how do we improve communication blocks? So when we're faced with a communication block, what are some of the things that we need to do? First off, I think we need to be aware that there actually is a communication block. And sometimes we as mentors, we get caught up in the excitement of a mentoring relationship and we lose sight of being aware and being present in the moment. We need to be able to address those blocks when they actually occur. And in order to do so, we need to actually have strategies in place to be able to address the various types of blocks. We need to make sure that we have an open conversation. Remember that mentoring is a two-way trusted relationship, and I said two-way. So the conversation needs to be very much an open conversation. And it does require a trusted relationship. We have another segment on building of a trusted relationship. Later, you can access that through the IMC library. But for now, the aspect or the idea of a trusted relationship, we here at the International Mentoring Community see that as a foundation or a cornerstone in building a successful mentoring relationship. So remember that one of the most important things you can do is building that trusted relationship. So how can a mentor communicate effectively with the mentee? This is where we kind of get into the nuts and bolts of the whole communication space. So active listening and actually hearing what is being said. And so that requires that you as the mentor have some degree or some level of presence, like being presence in the moment so that you're able to actually listen and hear what's being said. Every conversation has trigger words. There are trigger words in that conversation that may have some subtle or hidden messages, but they may also guide us as to where we're going to go next in the conversation. So listen for those trigger words and make sure that you're present and in the moment so that you actually can hear some of those trigger words. Be mindful of body language. And nowadays, when we're dealing with virtual mentoring, it is sometimes hard. It just requires that you be more attentive and that you are mindful, actually being mindful of changes in the body language and positioning, how they're positioning themselves when they have a conversation with you. Bear in mind that it's still not quite the same as face to face, but you still need to be mindful of that body language. Listen for deflections. And what I mean by that, especially now when we're dealing with all kinds of stress and anxiety, and that sometimes people have a tendency not to want to talk about things that they're dealing with. And so they have a tendency to want to deflect in a different direction. I find that I see that in a lot of people that are dealing with mental health challenges, in that they may not be quite ready to open up and talk, so they'll deflect. They'll make some statements that'll cause some deflection in a different direction. And then finally, the questioning technique versus the telling. So that's as I prefer to refer to it, as the Socratic method of questioning, where we ask a series of questions to guide people to the answers rather than us telling them where they need to go or what the actual answer is. So looking at it from the aspect of how can the mentor confirm that they are actually communicating effectively, well, they can summarize the conversation. And that's something that I typically will do at the end of a session is, today we talked about this, this, and this. What do we see as some of the next steps where we're going to go in order to address some of those things that we've talked about? Where practical, document, especially when there are action items to be completed. Have a conversation with your mentee as to who is going to take the notes. But what I encourage you to do is make really good use of your mentoring log. And this is a place where you as the mentor can have some notes, some practical notes that will help trigger where your conversation started and where it ended up and who's going to look after what. So the use of the mentoring log is extremely important. I also find the log really works well for me when I want to follow up from the past session and be able to take a look at the growth that we've had over the last, say, a couple weeks or a month, for example. So following up using the mentoring log as sort of your criteria is another great way to be able to stay plugged into communicating effectively. So in closing, I wanted to provide you with a couple of references that you can go and take a look at that specifically talk about the aspect of communicating effectively. So I hope that you found today's conversation beneficial. And like I said, there are some additional videos in the IMC library that speak to effective communication skills. And I encourage you to listen to those as well as some of the documentation that's in there around effective communication skills. So have a great day and all the best in your mentoring journey.